What's going on, and welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. We are coming off of a Thursday night football, and what a game this turned out to be. The pregame show, myself, Dave Sherpin, Adam Kaufman, we were not very high on this game. We were not expecting much, as you would anticipate with a 41.5 or 42 over-under, and we got tons and tons of scoring. It started early. Okay, Chargers win 34-27. The over flies over that. The Chargers, they win the money line. They cover, whether it was 2.5, 3 points, wherever you may have gotten it throughout the week. Really, really great second half from the Chargers. Really terrible second half from the Broncos. It was just, flip one side to the other coin, whatever you want to call it. Broncos awesome in the first, terrible in the second. Chargers terrible in the first, awesome in the second. We got a lot to get to because we got some players flying over props. We got some players falling well below their props. As we talked about on the pregame show, there was so much uncertainty outside of essentially Ladd McConkey and Courtland Sutton, and especially in the running back room. We got a lot to get to. So let's just start with the Broncos. Bo Nix, 29 of 40, 263, 2 passing touchdowns, no interceptions. He goes over all of his props. His yardage prop was sitting at, 221, 222, whatever it was, the 2 touchdowns. He had both of those in the first half. So he flies over the yards. He goes over the attempts, goes over the completions. I spoke about the attempts specifically. He goes over that number. Running back room, Audric Estime, 9 carries, 48 yards, 1 touchdown. We saw that to open up the game. Bo Nix, Dave mentioned his rushing yards. It goes over that with the 25 rushing yards. Javonte Williams, 4 carries for 24 yards. I spoke about Javonte Williams specifically on the pregame show, saying that he would go under 10.5 carries, and he ended with 4. That is as easy as it gets. Then the wide receiving room, all over the place, just completely all over the place. Javonte Williams led the team with 11 targets, 7 catches, 29 yards. Courtland Sutton, their best player, ended with just 5 catches for 50 yards. It's a bit of a surprise to me, and this is what we kind of spoke about. He should have been their main guy. I would realistically, Courtland Sutton should have 9, 10, 11 targets. He should be the primary option. Marvin Mims does end with 62 yards. If we have the secondary wide receiver graphics from the pregame show, if we have Mims up there, Troy Franklin, any of these guys, because some of these players did hit the over, and this is again kind of thing that Adam and I spoke about, where it's like you can maybe take a shot on 5 of these players, and if 3 of them hit the over, you'd be cashing, and that's kind of what we saw with Mims hitting the over, Troy Franklin hitting the over, Sutton falling below, Bailey falling below, Javonte Williams hitting the over. So an okay prop day, all things considered, from the Broncos. This is obviously more about their real-life football, not securing their playoff spot, whatever it might be. As you see, Marvin Mims, 3 catches, 62 yards, obviously plenty of breakaway speed. Chargers side of things, so much better in the second half compared to where they were in the first. Now, at halftime, I spoke about two props. One was Stone Smart going over 36 or 37.5 yards. He ends with 37. So depending on where you got it, that is obviously extremely close. And I spoke about Ladd McConkey having a catch on their first drive of the second half, which he did, which was sitting at plus 100. So the McConkey one hits, the Smart one doesn't, or does, depending if you got it at 36 or 37.5. Ladd McConkey, awesome option. Obviously, setting records as a rookie wide receiver, 6 catches, 87 yards. He goes over his prop. Let's get to Justin Herbert. Great game from Justin Herbert. 284 in the air, the 2 touchdowns. He does have the 1 interception, which Dave also mentioned on the pregame show. There's 2 games in a row with an interception for Justin Herbert. He goes over 20.5 completions with 23, as I spoke about on the pregame show. All 3 straight bets that I spoke about on the pregame show won. He flies over his yards. His halftime line was sitting at 274. He goes over that 284. Let's get to the running back room. This is very, very deceiving. Gus Edwards, 14 carries for 68 yards. He does have the 2 touchdowns. What do we need to know about this? And I've said this the entire season. We need to take context in what we see with the yards. Gus Edwards has 68 yards. Do we have the pregame graphics for the running backs of what is? I don't remember what his yardage prop was off the top of my head. It was 35. Almost doubles this, right? Almost doubles this. Gus Edwards, 68 yards. He had that long run right there in the fourth quarter for 43 yards, which means what? 68 minus the 43, 25. Other carries, he had 13 carries for 25 yards. Horrible. Kamani Vidal, 5 carries for 24 yards. Horrible. This is a Justin Herbert-led offense for the rest of the season until they get J.K. Dobbins. Coming up against the break, plenty more to discuss about this game and the Sunday game. Stay tuned here. Pro Football Today.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take.
Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what you want to do, we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're going to go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's going to help me get the job done. There is not going to be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on? Welcome to Pro Football Today. Post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. We're coming off the heels of Thursday Night Football. A huge win for the Chargers, 34-27 victory. They win, they cover. The over flies over. It was a 41.5, 42 over-under, depending on where you got it. We are recapping some of the players. We're going to jump into the games coming up on Saturday, Sunday, you name it. Let's get to it. We're talking about the running back room for the Chargers. And at first glance, again, it seems like Gus Edwards had a big game, which he did. 68 yards and the 2 touchdowns, especially the 2 touchdowns, is big there. But again, 43 of his 68 yards came on that long run in the fourth quarter. That means he had 13 carries for 25 yards. Incredibly inefficient. Kamani Vidal, 5 carries for 24 yards, as I said right before the break. They have nothing going for them on the ground. Justin Herbert is going to be required to pass the ball at a high volume and be effective with it to close out the season until they get J.K. Dobbins back. Wide receiver room, of course, led by Ladd McConkey, the 6 catches for 87 yards. Palmer getting in the mix, 3 catches for 41. Hassan Haskins, their 4th string running back, really? I mean, if we include Dobbins, Edwards, Vidal, and now Haskins, he's coming with the touchdown late at the game there. Stone Smart, obviously, still seeing some action because Will Dissly is out. He goes to 37 yards. I believe his, do we have his graphic? I believe his prop was, 29.5 for Stone Smart coming in, 3 catches for 37 yards. Decent game from him. Quinton Johnson still can't catch the ball. 6 targets, 3 catches, 18 yards. Huge game for the Chargers and their playoff hopes, as they were talking about it at the end of the broadcast. They are nearly secure at like 97% or whatever it was to make the playoffs. Not officially official, but same thing can be said about them. 34-27 final. Chargers win, cover, over, flies, over. Let's get to this weekend because this is an immensely awesome weekend of football. We have so much going on. These are hugely pivotal games. Let's start with the Texans and the Chiefs. The line movement in this game has been absolutely insane. It was 2.5 open. And then the Mahomes news is that he may not be playing. And then it flips to the Texans -2.5. Texans -3. -3.5, whatever it is. Now it's all the way back to the Chiefs at -3.5. And there are reports that Mahomes is not on the injury report for the Chiefs, and he is good to go. He's been practicing in full. Not only that, there's also reports that the Chiefs may be activating Hollywood Brown off of IR, who is yet to play this season. He has been out for the entire year. So we'd like final confirmation on a lot of these things. It is 3.5. It's past that key number. The trend for the Chiefs this year is that they do not cover games. Of course, they covered last week versus the Browns. This is the epitome of a game. I do not think we can be trusting the Chiefs. Ultimately, taking the Chiefs in game -2.5 will be my favorite bet of this game. And that line may never be there, but that's what I want to take. Harrison Butker is back off of IR. They can win this game. 2.5 is the number that I want. It may never happen in game, but I'm not betting 3.5 on the Chiefs, a team that cannot cover with the Mahomes that may not be 100% healthy. Steelers, Ravens is the other Saturday game, 44.5 over-under. Ravens at home, -6.5. They are favorites. This is a huge game to determine the AFC North. And if we have that AFC North futures graphic, I said this last week, and I'll say it again, the time to bet the Ravens was last week before those Sunday games. Steelers were going to lose at the Eagles, and the Ravens were going to beat the Giants. Surprise, surprise, as 16.5-point favorites. And the Ravens were sitting at +175 to win a division. That line is down to about +125 or so. If we take a quick look at this, it's off the board. All right, so that is off the board for that, but it's obviously not looking super great for the Steelers as they still have to play the Chiefs next week and then to end the season with the Bengals. Very tough schedule for the Chiefs. I like the under in this game. The big news also for this is, will we be seeing George Pickens play? Will we be seeing TJ Watt play for the Steelers? I think it's more about Pickens in this game. Not to say that TJ Watt is going to make an impact, because he, of course, is an immensely impactful player. But the Steelers' offense has been terrible over the last few weeks when they do not have that consistent downfield threat. They cannot look to run the ball 40 times with Najee Harris when you don't have consistent receiving options. When Pat Freiermuth right now is coming in at 36.5 yards, Calvin Austin's coming at 40.5 yards. It is a tough go at things on offense for the Steelers right now. Ultimately, I'm looking at the under on this game. I could see the Ravens pushing it to the over. That's the only concern that they have, that they get up and the Steelers can't score and they want to make a statement, and the Ravens come out and they drop 30-some-odd points, and the Steelers manage their way to 14 or whatever it's going to be. And as I mentioned on the Sports Millions show with Joe Madden, the bet for this game is a Chris Boswell prop. Chris Boswell, they can't score touchdowns. They can move the ball a little bit, but they can't score touchdowns. And Chris Boswell going over 6.5 kicking points or 1.5 field goals, whatever it might be, is the bet to make for the Steelers. So those are the two Saturday games, 1 and 4:30 or whatever it is time for them. Let's move on to the Sunday slate of games. Another AFC North matchup, Bengals at home hosting the Browns. News for this is that Dorian Thompson-Robinson should be starting DTR for the Browns. His prop is sitting at 191.5. James Winston threw some picks last week. He gets benched. I think there is a lot of arguments to be made that DTR is not a quarterback that will be throwing at a super high volume despite the bad defense on the Bengals side, despite the fact that they lost Nick Chubb due to a broken foot he's done for the year. This could be a big spot for Jerome Ford, but I think there's an argument to make that DTR, we can take unders on him, and they will bring Jameis back in. This will not be a pretty game from the Browns side of things, but if DTR was good enough, he would have been starting over Jameis Winston, and that's not the case. They're doing this just to change quarterbacks, which is no reason that they should be changing them. So I honestly like playing the under 191.5 for DTR, expecting that he will struggle, and then they just bring Jameis back in, and then we're cashing all the unders. So that's where I want to go. I think I would look to build a little correlation and maybe take a DTR interception prop. If those will be posted, at least not seeing them right now on the FanDuel Sportsbook, but if he throws interceptions, he hits the under, and then we see Jameis Winston coming. That's where I look. As usual, the best spot to go for the Bengals, well, we can look to plenty of their offensive options, is Joe Burrow over 36.5 passing attempts. They do not have a consistent run game. Chase Brown has absolutely been better, especially in recent weeks, but they are passed at a super high volume when we're seeing Joe Burrow with 37, 44, 38, 50, 56, 39, and 37 attempts over this last stretch of games. The last time he did not hit the over, oddly enough, was against Cleveland, but I still like him to go over there, passing at a super high volume. I'm not going back and looking at a one-game sample size for Joe Burrow versus Cleveland. Let's move on because we have plenty more games to get to, some super important games, some games that are maybe not so important just because we're not dealing with playoff-bound teams. One of the games that will be the most interesting will be the Atlanta Falcons at home, 8.5-point favorites, taking on the New York Giants, a 42.5 over-under, and Kirk Cousins has been benched. Michael Penix, their rookie first-round quarterback, will be taking the helm. I am not seeing any props for this game, at least on the FanDuel Sportsbook. Again, 8.5-point spread in favor of the Falcons, 42.5 over-under. Theoretically, you could make the same argument that I just made about DTR and the Browns for Michael Penix. What if he struggles? Do we take unders on his props? Do we take an interception prop? Will they bring Kirk Cousins back in? Those are all very, very viable routes. And initially, my instinct is no. My instinct is that they let him get out there. Now, I'm just searching around. Let me see. Okay, so over on the DraftKings Sportsbook, just taking a look around, Michael Penix is listed at 227.5. 227.5 for him. I think that number feels a touch high. Now, granted, it's the Giants. I don't think we have any concerns about the Giants defense, but we'll continue to dig into these props, the rest of the Sunday games, whatever it might be. There's a lot to get to. Eagles Commanders is a great game. We can touch on that. Some teams are fighting for playoff position, like the Rams. I think they're in a spot to win against the Jets. We can cover all of this. We're coming up against a break right now. Stay tuned here on SportsGrid. Pro Football Today postgame show with myself, Tom Vecchio. See you guys on the other side of this break.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this once?
Oh, Donnie, you've got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
Anyone that's been to a sporting event, the atmosphere before a game, I think Game Time Decisions has that same exact atmosphere. This is our arena. This is what we do. There is going to be an energy to Game Time Decisions that you will feel night in and night out. The excitement you get when you lock your bets in, when you're figuring out what we can zone in on the biggest games each night. I want this to be the place that people come to before the games start so they feel as ready as possible to lock in their cards. We are going to hit every single one of those markets that you need to know about. We're gonna go through every single thing, and I've got a great team behind me that's gonna help me get the job done. There is not gonna be a better place, I promise you, than Game Time Decisions to get that new information, react to it, and be able to then bet accordingly. We will have everything at our disposal, and we will use that to our advantage. I'm Kevin Walsh. Tune into Game Time Decisions from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern on SportsGrid.
What's going on? Welcome to Pro Football Today, a post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. We are running through the Sunday slate of games, a massively important weekend across the NFL. And just one note I want to make across the league, we are seeing a number of games that could have a little bit of a weather impact and not a whole lot of precipitation, but it is really, really cold in a lot of these games, along with some winds. KC, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Chicago, New York Jets, Washington, Seattle, Buffalo, and Green Bay. All of those games are going to be cold, wind, whatever it might be, temp in the 30s, 20s, making it feel colder than it is. So obviously weather does play a part when it comes to betting. Keep that in mind. Some of these games are played in domes. Just have to put that out there so we have all the information. Running through some of these games on the Sunday slate. Eagles Commanders, 45.5 over under, a 3.5 point spread in favor of the road Eagles. 3.5 points. Again, this kind of feels like a spot where I really want to wait to see if that number drops to 3 and or just try and take that number in game. Eagles -2.5. If the Commanders get out to an early lead, that's where I'll certainly look. When it comes to the 45.5 over under, I really want to lean under. I really do. The Eagles, they have the division locked up. I want to lean under. Now, do they have the division locked up like mathematically or like technically? No, but they have the division locked up. Let's just call it what it is. I want to lean under. I think the Commanders, they need to bring the intensity in this game. And we already know how good the Eagles defense is. So I think the Commanders need to match that, and this game plays towards the under. I think there will be a spot to find a middle. Play under 45.5. The game starts off a little bit slow. It's a divisional game, cold weather, late season, like these kind of things. Then we see it drop to maybe a 39, 38.5. You can get a nice middle of under 45.5 and over 38.5. That's where I'll ultimately be looking. Do I want to be playing any of these touchdown props? Maybe not. I don't mind taking a shot. Terry McLaurin has been super hot at plus 170. Getting a number one wide receiver for a team up at plus 170 is a spot that I always look. Don't really want to be going to too many props outside of that, expecting a lack of offense. Despite the passing that we saw from the Eagles with Devonta Smith and A.J. Brown both finding a touchdown last week after some comments the week prior because their passing offense wasn't there. Don't want to be going to too many props in that game. A game where I certainly want to be going to some props. Going to be the Cardinals taking on the Panthers. Panthers are 4.5 point home underdogs. They're taking on the Cardinals, and this is a week where the Cardinals need to come out and win. They're not mathematically eliminated from the playoffs. They still have a chance. I think this has to be a big game on the ground for James Conner, and we can sprinkle in some Trey McBride. Trey McBride has been downright awesome for the Cardinals this season. Consistent option each and every week. Now, his touchdown odds are sitting at plus 125, and everyone's trying to make the argument that, Trey McBride doesn't have any receiving touchdowns this year. He's setting records for a player with the most receptions without a receiving touchdown. Listen, he's got 2 receptions this year. He's got 2 touchdowns this year, one of which he ran in, and the second which he recovered a fumble. It counts as a touchdown. Is it a receiving touchdown? No. Both things can be true. So he has 2 touchdowns this year. It's not a receiving touchdown. The answer for Trey McBride is either going to his yards or his receptions. As usual, I always say the yards are easier, but the receptions are certainly very, very viable. It's sitting at 6.5. It is minus 146. I would say shop around to try and find the best lines available. When we're looking at Trey McBride's usage over this recent stretch of games, it has been absolutely unbelievable. And we look at DK quickly, it's minus 135 for over 6.5. So that is a little bit of a better line. 10, 14, 12, 15 targets for Trey McBride in this recent 4-game stretch with 9, 7, 12, and 12 receptions. He's going for 70-plus yards in 5 straight games, not just this 4-game stretch. He's going for 80-plus yards in 3 of these games, 95-plus yards in 2 of these games, and over 100 once, at least just in this stretch, not looking back earlier in the season. Trey McBride is awesome. I think you could look to him for 70-plus. You could ult him down and take 60-plus, go with SGP of Trey McBride, 60-plus James Conner, 60-plus on the ground, and the Cardinals win. Something like that. I think that's a very reasonable way to go about things. They are minus 4.5 point favorites. There are no rushing props up, at least for James Conner, just Chuba Hubbard props up at 70.5. Don't have any interest there. And of course, as more and more props come aboard, I will tweet any of the ones that I'm going to be on over on Twitter. Lions 6.5-point favorites taking on the Bears, 47.5 over under. We briefly mentioned this game on the pregame show. I think the Lions come out on fire. I think they really do. I think they come out in 6.5, and frankly, I'll be looking to take the Lions on one of their alt spreads. Let me just take a look at it. What it is now at minus 9.5 for the Lions at plus 136. They could win by 10 points. It's the Bears, right? Like, if they can win by a touchdown, they can win by a touchdown and a field goal. I will be alting the Lions up to minus 9.5 and maybe a small sprinkle on minus 13.5. Them winning this game by 2 touchdowns, I don't think would shock anyone. We'll get to a few more in the last segment. Really want to touch on the Rams. I think they come out also on fire going up against the Jets. A hugely important game for the Rams because the Vikings are playing at Seattle. That is a very tough matchup for Seattle. So if the Rams win and Seattle loses, the Rams will be an awesome spot for the NFC West. We're coming up against a break right here, so stay tuned on SportsGrid Pro Football Today post-game show. We can go over this. We can maybe take a look at some futures and anything you want to get in before things start. Stay tuned.
Two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
If they beat South Carolina, they're going to 10-1. So if you're on this, if you're TCU trained, listen, Mark and Chavi have done the job, but I may be the spokesman for TCU women's basketball because I believe in these guys and I know what they can do. If they beat South Carolina, they're going to be 10-1 to win a national championship.
Betting above the rim, only on SportsGrid.
The two guys that can do it all.
Too much electricity this morning.
This is a good time. We're having a lot of fun.
I had to do a triple take. Ka-ching! Why? Because of parity. I didn't mean to offend.
Yeah, it's not going to happen.
Load management is a dirty word.
Let him rip.
You know what? Circumstances provide the results. What?
How do you do this one?
Oh, Donnie, you got such a good show there.
A network that is booming.
The Early Line, only on SportsGrid.
We got the NBA Cup going on. Not that anybody really cares per se about the NBA Cup. Now, I got to be honest with you. I actually did try to look of like, okay, like what does it mean like for the NBA Cup? Like who's playing for what here? And I lost interest and I gave up after about 30 seconds. And I was like, you know what? Whatever, dude. There's NBA games.
Sports Rage tonight, only on SportsGrid.
He also said that the Bears head coaching opening would be the most coveted job after the season.
They'll let that guy stay. I heard today that they were very worried about screwing up Caleb Williams, so that he likes this guy Brown so much that they may let him stay as the head coach. What a disaster that'll turn into.
Pharrell Coast to Coast, only on SportsGrid.
What's going on? Welcome to Pro Football Today post-game show. My name is Tom Vecchio. We're running through some of the games on the Sunday slate. We just finished Thursday night football. Chargers, phenomenal second half for them, coming away with the win, 34-27 for them, obviously securing so much for their playoff hopes. Let's get into more games on the Sunday slate. And as I mentioned before the break, the Rams. They're -3 at the New York Jets, a 46.5 over under. I love Matt Stafford this weekend. Absolutely love Matt Stafford this weekend. This is a hugely important game for the Rams to win. That's the first part. They're coming off an extremely slow game, obviously, last Thursday night versus the 49ers, 12-6 game. Everyone knows about it. Stafford only passed for 160 yards. Don't really want to be looking at that game. They had the extra rest because they played on Thursday. What have we seen from the Jets defense over the past few weeks? The answer is nothing. Mac Jones last week. Mac Jones, a backup quarterback, threw for 294 and 2 touchdowns against the Jets defense. The week prior, Tua Tagovailoa, granted the game went to overtime, he still threw for 331 and 2 touchdowns. You're not going to tell me, as I said on the Monday recap show, that Matt Stafford can't go over 243.5? 243.5? That's my spot for this week. Matt Stafford over 243.5, and I want to build in some type of SGPs that we're going to see Stafford have a big game. We're going to see Kyron Williams on the ground. His line's sitting at 80.5. I'll probably alt him down a little bit. Puka Nakua's up at 90.5. Cooper Kupp is coming off a donut game last Thursday. His number's down at 57.5. Find some combination where we get Stafford for 225 plus and Cooper for 50 plus and Puka for 60 plus and Kyron Williams for 70 plus and get the players involved that we know that are going to be touching the ball. That is what we've talked about for the Rams the entire season. I've said it time and time again. The Rams are an awesome offense to bet when it comes to player props because we know exactly where the ball is going. These 3 players, I would have to do the actual math to find out, but let's just say these 3 players accounted for 80% of the total touches on offense on a game-by-game basis. That's fantastic. We know exactly where the ball is going to. We're not worried about Tutu Atwell. We're not worried about Demarcus Robinson or Tyler Johnson and some of these secondary, tertiary players getting involved. We know where the ball is going. The Rams have a huge game to win. And as I mentioned, Minnesota is on the road taking on Seattle. Now, the news for this game, to kind of bring these two together, is that both Geno Smith and Kenneth Walker practiced in full for Seattle. Kenneth Walker has been out for the past 2 weeks. Zach Charbonnet has been seeing the starting job for the Seattle Seahawks. Last week on Sunday night against the Packers, we saw Geno Smith leave the game early due to a knee injury. But again, the report as of Thursday afternoon is that Smith and Walker are both practicing in full. The Vikings are 3-point road favorites over the Seahawks. This is a huge game for the NFC West. So the Rams are not scoreboard watching because this game's obviously happening at 4 o'clock. So the Rams need to come out and take care of business in the 1 p.m. window, win this game against the Jets, who have quit on the season. They've quit as a team. Stafford, Kupp, Williams, and Puka Nacua in that order are going to run through the Jets defense. If Mac Jones can do it, Matt Stafford can do it. Let's talk about what a Mac Jones former team, or his only former team, the Pats. They are 14.5-point underdogs visiting the Buffalo Bills. Bills, absolutely unbelievable over these past few weeks. They're scoring all the points. Josh Allen is Superman. As Adam said on the pregame show, the day that the Superman trailer dropped or whatever that might be, Josh Allen is Superman. 240.5 is his passing prop. Seems a little bit light considering what he's been doing, scored 19,000 touchdowns over the past few weeks, passing for 1,000 yards apparently every single game. The 240 is obviously building in the fact that they're 14-point favorites, and it might get to a certain point that they don't need to pass the ball because they're going to be up by multiple touchdowns. I don't mind playing the Josh Allen number. I don't mind playing over 240. I don't mind alting it to 250 or 275 plus. I think Josh Allen wants to come out and make a statement and secure his MVP. That's what we have to actually talk about in these final few weeks of the season. that these players have incentive, whether it be playoffs, whether it be awards, whether it be contract incentives. Josh Allen is going to come out and he could put up the 240 in the first half alone against this terrible New England defense. So give me Josh Allen this weekend. Give me Matt Stafford this weekend. Quarterbacks taking care of business as their teams are pushing for the playoffs. We have a great weekend on tap of NFL action, college action. Stay tuned here on SportsGrid for all your football needs. We, of course, be back here on the pregame show on Monday Night Football. Good luck with all your bets this weekend. See you guys then.
Holidays come with a touch of craziness, from unwrapping the latest storylines to the